I wash myself with a rag on a stick.
For some reason, one of the top topics, nay, questions that has been floating around the internet as of late is what would happen if you stopped showering for an entire year? While many YouTube personalities jump on opportunities to crush the latest challenge, no one jumped on this question, even if it would be a lot easier than mailing oneself across the Atlantic. We're using the word mailing loosely here. So here are the top 10 things that'd happen if you stopped showering for a year. Prepare to get gross.
This may smell bad, kid, but it'll keep you warm.
Up first, the obvious. You'd smell.
It stinks. It stinks. It stinks.
The first thing that I'm sure you and those around you would notice if you stopped bathing is that you'd smell really bad.
I would tell. Okay.
First off, when you stop bathing, you'd acquire a ton of bacteria on the top of your skin that when mixed with your sweat gives off an odor. Beyond that, there are different types of sweat that your body produces, which is why your armpits tend to smell a lot faster than other parts of your body. Luckily, otherwise your entire body would just reek whenever you sweated even a little.
What is that smell? Oh.
The sweat in your armpits actually comes from different glands than the sweat on the rest of your body. These glands are called eccrine glands. Eccrine glands tend to lurk in areas that have hair, like your armpits and, other regions, whereas apocrine glands tend to be everywhere else. Eccrine glands produce a thicker, waxier sweat, similar to what creates earwax in your ears. And when you mix that with the bacteria that chills in your pits, which is different from the bacteria elsewhere on your body as well, let's just say, long story short, it's a bad mix.
Brian, I'm going to be honest with you, that smells like pure gasoline.
So, when you're not showering, that bacteria has more room to grow, more sweat, wet or dry to mix with, and just more dead skin cells to munch on. That's a terrible combination and would most likely lead to all sorts of skin problems. Hope you're not too grossed out yet to hit that subscribe button and click that bell to join our notification squad. You'd most likely end up with brown clumps on your skin.
Toxins.
As the first entry in this video showed, one of the most important aspects of bathing is that it removes dead skin cells, bacteria, and dried sweat and/or oil from the body. When that combination of skin byproducts is left to fester, it creates all sorts of problems, one of which is that it becomes a magnet for dirt and grime. This combination would also either cause the skin to become dry or oily depending on the person, as the skin's natural cycle would essentially be broken as the dead skin isn't removed by soap and water.
Side effects.
That means that the skin can be infected with fungus and yeast on top of the bacteria we've already discussed, which can actually lead to clusters of warts. Beyond that, the areas of the body where oil gathers most, like your armpits, behind your ears, or under your breasts if you're a woman or a robust man, would have a high risk for basically turning brown as dirt, and pollutants continually mix with the body's natural oils and sweat. Basically, you'd turn into a toad person, only you would most likely give some warts if they touched you, unlike the urban legend about gaining warts from toads.
The Hypno-Toad.
If you got a cut, you'd be in trouble.
Well, that's not good.
There's a reason that so many people died from infections before antibiotics, including antibiotic soap and other things like astringents were discovered. And that's because bacteria is everywhere, even if you bathe multiple times a day.
I just have a speech impediment. And a stomach virus.
That's why children are always taught to clean their cuts and scrapes, as you can pick up bacteria or even viruses in the simplest of cuts and abrasions. Multiply that risk by 100 or 1,000-fold if you've not been showering, as your body would be a walking petri dish that was almost aggressively and exponentially increasing the amount of bacteria that grew on your skin. Don't just take it from us. A member of the American Association of Dermatology said, while infection may not be a concern in the beginning, carrying a large load of bacteria on the skin can pose a problem if the skin barrier were to become compromised in some way, i.e. through a cut or scrape. Youch. Your scalp would drive you crazy.
What you got, Irv?
Oh, beats me, Sarge. Dandruff, seborrhea, maybe just dry, itchy scalp.
As we've seen, the longer you go without showering, the more things like oils would accumulate on your body. One of the places where they'd really both accumulate and cause problems would be on your scalp. Beyond that, showering and using shampoo help remove dead skin and hair from your scalp, meaning that if you stop showering and shampooing, you'd be creating a perfect store of oil and dead skin on your scalp. That means that your scalp would not only itch, but begin to burn as well. Beyond that, your hair would begin to become matted together, creating involuntary dreadlocks that'd smell terrible and would most likely break off after a while as your scalp's ecosystem goes haywire and becomes dry in some areas.
Not so bad.
If you learn nothing else from this video, just remember that your body is basically an ecosystem, and bathing is an important part of the process that keeps things on an even keel. While we're the only animals that have to jump in the water to bathe, which is a lot better than the alternative of using our tongues, it's clearly part of how we evolved, and is something that everyone should do regularly in order to keep their exterior healthy. That having been said,
no thank you, I take it black. Like my man.
we understand that this topic may make you want to run to the nearest bathroom and start the faucet. We really do. But at the same time, there are always two ends to a spectrum. And while bathing is clearly an important part of skin, hair, and nose health, it's not something you want to overdo. In fact, in terms of health, you needn't shower every single day.
Do not go in there.
Americans, or at least American men, tend to shower every single day, with many showering more than once a day, and that really doesn't have any positive effect in terms of skin and hair health when compared to people who shower every 2, 3, or 4 days. Showering daily is thought to be for aesthetics only, and really the only reason you should bathe often is if you have a compromised immune system, as you would want to remove as much bacteria from the skin in that situation as possible. So, as long as you're not someone who sweats profusely or that has really oily hair, there's really no reason to start or end your day with a shower or bath. That is, of course, unless you use that time to prepare for the day or to unwind, which adds another level to bathing that, frankly, we don't have the time to get into here. We're too busy showering 15 times a day.
Still not clean. Still not clean.
You would time travel.
We're sending you back to the future!
Depending on how your skin works, regardless of your age, you'd most likely start breaking out in acne on your face and other parts of your body where sweat accumulates. Your body creates something called sebum, which builds up mostly on your face and clogs pores and inflames hair follicles. That means you'd basically be living that recurring nightmare where the acne that you had during middle school returned. So, you'd basically be traveling back in time, at least in one respect. But this time, things could get a lot worse, as if or when your pimples are popped or break open, you'd be at a really high risk of developing a secondary infection. That's what happens when people who are bedridden end up with bed sores, as their bodies basically accumulate sweat at the pressure points where their bodies touch the bed. They develop sores that fester and get so bad that they can become life-threatening. And because you're not washing your body, those zits would basically just get worse and worse until you died from them. At least you'd go out doing what you love, sticking it to the soap companies, I guess?
Yeah! In your face!
Then there's your Nether-Regions.
Oh, hits Modansky with the ball right in the Nether-Regions.
Ever hear of intertrigo? Let's hope you haven't, as it's just awful. It's a type of inflammatory rash or dermatitis that occurs on the skin in areas that have a large buildup of sweat, urine, and/or feces. So, if you're not showering for a year, regardless of how good you wipe, you'd end up with a yeast infection if you're lucky, and a terrible case of intertrigo if you're human. While you can also develop intertrigo between your fingers, toes, and in your armpits, the trifecta of disgustingness that creates the most terrible forms of intertrigo obviously occurs where the sun doesn't shine.
There was darkness.
What's even worse is that most treatments for intertrigo involve washing and drying the area before applying medication and then powder to keep the area dry. That's something that wouldn't be possible if you weren't bathing, so you'd really be at risk of a terribly painful infection that would just get worse and worse and worse. Beyond that, even if you were lucky enough to dodge intertrigo, you'd just be horribly uncomfortable
Come on, open up!
all the time. Toe jam in you.
Still can't reach!
You'd be doing a lot of toe touching if you stopped showering for a year, as your toes would be driving you absolutely insane. There's a reason that people talk about toe jam and why those commercials exist where a crappy CGI monster is attacking some white guy's toes. It's because there's a type of fungus that loves to attack your toes, and that's kept at bay by bathing with soap. When you're not doing that, the fungus can grow unabated, as would the dead skin between the toes, creating crusty chunks of skin surrounded by fungus. While that'd be horribly painful and itchy, what's worse is that the same fungus loves to hang out in your groin as well, something that CGI monster never tells you. That means that if your feet rub against your underwear while you're putting them on, which they most likely will, you're most definitely going to end up with that same fungus going to town on your Nether-Regions. Talk about a case of the Mondays.
Yep, it's Monday out here too.
The effects would linger.
It's gonna come off, right?
Okay. Let's say that you actually went an entire year without bathing for some reason. Perhaps you were stranded on a landlocked mountaintop. Maybe you, I don't know, gave in to an internet trend. Either way, you'd think that you'd be fine if you just hopped into the world's longest and most painful shower. It turns out that that wouldn't be the case, as I'm sure you've surmised.
I knew it!
There are dermatologists who have experience with this sort of thing, and they say that in their patients that haven't washed a certain area of their body for months at a time, that it takes days or even weeks or months for that skin to return to a normal state. When you add all of the possible diseases and fungal infections to the list, and warts to boot, there's a chance that you'd never return to normal.
Fine. Break down.
Insecure.
Neurotic.
And emotional.
If normal is defined as how you were before you decided to not shower for a year, with things like intertrigo and toe jam in your junk going unabated for weeks to months, there's a decent chance that you'd have some scarring and even loss of skin in some areas. That's not to mention the final entry in this video, which is impossible to return from. That is, unless you're part of the Illuminati.
Do you pledge your souls to the Uzma Kappa Brotherhood?
You could die.
I could have died!
Keep it together, man!
This entry is short and sweet, as this entire video basically leads up to this point. If you really couldn't wash yourself and that landlocked island was somewhere that didn't get rain, there's a good chance that you develop a skin infection or multiple skin infections that could just get worse and worse, which could lead to gangrene or sepsis, both of which could kill you. Beyond that, people contract things like MRSA and flesh-eating bacteria from open wounds, and so there's always a chance that you'd pick up one of those darlings when you're walking around with open skin wounds all over your face, body, and special places. So the next time your roommate complains that you used all the hot water, just let them know that that shower time is a matter of life and death. While this may sound hyperbolic, just go a week without a shower and test the theory. You'll begin to notice the beginning of most of the things on this list, which means that you'd be playing Russian roulette with not bathing. Although it does mean that if someone calls you out for having BO, you can laugh it off knowing that you're just living the thug life. Just make sure your feet don't hit your underwear when you're not changing them. Feeling like you need a good scrub after that? Well, use your loofah to swipe at that subscribe button and hit that notification bell. And don't go anywhere, check out some of our other, less gross videos.